So I don't know if anybody reads our internet, but I titled this talk, "How does your practice help you to love the Donald, Hillary, Ted, Sarah, Rush, Bernie, etc.?" So some of you might have noticed we have an election coming up. It's hard to miss unless you've been in a coma, maybe. So this time we have an unusual chance to pick from a selection of candidates from the whole political spectrum, or at least a wide spectrum. And sometimes that's not the case. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about how this practice that we do, that we're learning, how it can help us navigate a period of history and time like this. And also, how can this practice help us navigate all these opinions and views that we have on everything? You know, what does the Buddha say about that? So there's a sutta called the Aggivachagotta Sutta, and Vachagotta was a wandering sadhu back in the day of the Buddha, and they sat down for a talk, and he had all these metaphysical questions for the Buddha, you know, and he was very interested in these metaphysical questions. Is the cosmos finite or infinite? You know, are the body and consciousness the same or different? What happens to a Buddha after the Buddha dies? Do they exist or not exist? You know, so he had all these questions. And what the Buddha said to Vachagotta is, basically he was saying that any position that you have, that anyone can take, and is a thicket of views, a wilderness of views, a contortion of views, a writhing of views, a fetter of views. It is accompanied by suffering and does not lead to disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, to calm, to direct knowledge, to full awakening. Okay, so you get the idea the Buddha has this thing about views. But basically he was talking about or cautioning against the futility of spending so much time with these kind of mind-wrangling questions. Now the Buddha taught for 45 years, but really if you look at all the discourses that were given, 99% of those discourses are kind of addressing the basic human problem, the most foundational human problem. Okay? How do we suffer and what are we going to do about it? That's what he was most concerned with. And yes, there are portions here and there where there is some brief descriptions of other realms and this and that. But primarily, he would keep bringing his audience, when those questions were asked, back to, okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. How are we suffering? What can we do about it? And that's how he addressed this tangle of views, or this thicket of views. So, suffering, the causes of suffering, the grasping. You know, he talks a lot about how grasping causes us suffering, grasping for what is most pleasant. We want to hold on to it and grip it really tight, and it keeps changing and goes away, and then we suffer. Or we thrashing and pushing away at something that's uncomfortable. It wears us out because we feel an aversion toward it. And in a deeper investigation, the Buddha taught all those years that, hey, there is an end to this. It's not, that isn't all of life, that there is an end to suffering. And there's actually a path that you can follow and practices you can do and perspectives that you can cultivate that are going to reduce and ultimately eliminate the suffering. So he discouraged this kind of perseveration on these metaphysical questions. And the Buddha talked about, it's related to the kind of perseveration on these metaphysical questions, the opinions, etc., the attachment to views he talked about. So you got to be careful with attachment to views. Now, what does he even mean by that? Zen master Sun Xian wrote a book entitled "Open Mouth, Already a Mistake." Open mouth, already a mistake. You can think of some of these debates and so he always encourages students to keep don't know mind, to stay open to possibilities, kind of have a humbleness of your opinion, whatever it is. And you've probably seen the bumper sticker one place or another, don't believe everything you think. So this Buddhist theme of taking opinions lightly, you see it all throughout history. There was a Japanese Renzai Zen master, Bankei. He lived in the 1600s, and he would advise his students not to side with ourselves. Don't side with yourself. But you get the picture. It's like, just chill a little bit on these very fixed ideas. So it's not so much the holding of opinions. I mean, we've got responsibilities. We have to make discernments in this life. Things concerning our health, our families, our finances, our environment, etc. There's a lot of discernments we have to make. We have to make decisions. I mean, should I do this or that? Should I believe this person or that person? But these decisions are seldom made from like ironclad facts, ultimate truth. Mostly they're made from opinions and partial information. We all like to think that we're really smart people and dedicated practitioners, and we make decisions just mostly on our significant intellects. That we choose the decision that's kind of best for us and best for society. William O. Douglas, who was a long-term Supreme Court justice, and I thought of him when I was thinking about this topic because Antonin Scalia just died, but he once shared what you might consider an insight and almost a kind of confession. And he was speaking about how the Supreme Court justices make decisions, how they come about it. So he said this: on the Supreme Court where we work, 90% of any decision is emotional. Then the 10% rational part of us supplies the reasons for supporting our emotional response. It's probably, there's probably a little hyperbole in there, but he's not off the mark. And I reflect, and we all can reflect, how we're affected now in our opinions and ideas by our early experiences. It's just part of being alive. I came from a virtually uneducated family in a lower working class household. There's little money. And so the climate I was breathing, the air that I was breathing in that climate was of scarcity. And there was some fear, and there was distrust of the wealthy, distrust of the ruling class. And there was always the expectation we were going to get the short end of the stick. It was just the way it was laid out. So that emotional set, although I know it doesn't serve me, it's still has effect in my opinions and my political ideas and who I support and who I don't support and my distrust of authority, you know. And in many occasions, looking back, my distrust of authority was totally unwarranted and just created problems, you know. So it was kind of like the Bob Dylan take on things. You know, don't follow leaders, watch your parking meters, you know. I think that was in Subterranean Homesick Blues, but I'm not sure. So as an adult, my circumstances don't remotely mirror any of those early ones. Lots of education, enough material things, but it still affects my opinions, my ideas. So we're not as rational as we'd like to believe. So is it Hillary for you, Donald, Bernie, Ted, Marco, Ben, you know, or somebody else? And how did you get there? You know, what effects on your life and experiences have you moving in one direction or another? But I noticed during this cycle, this is really a pretty heated cycle that we're in. And talking to friends, there's a lot of emotion about it. And I find myself getting involved, getting kind of aroused in ways that, like, ooh, look at that, you know. And you're hearing people and friends and that you run across, oh, that's so-and-so, they're crazy, you know. It would be horrible if we had that person. Or that person's so naive, I can't believe they believe that. Or I'm not sure that person ever tells the truth. I can't believe anything they say. You know, it depends on which way the wind's blowing. So in this cycle, it's almost impossible for us not to get into the us and them. You know, to create even bigger fissures and separations than we already have. You know, the truth is, I really want my particular candidate to win. And when someone else is supporting someone else, it kind of irks me. There's a little internal thing that happens, and there's even a little fear. Well, what's that about? You know. But what's probably what I know to be true is that people with different opinions and ideas are feeling the same way about me. You know, when I open my trap. You know? So there's a challenge here, a spiritual challenge for our practice to take on with this. So soon, probably the field will be winnowed down to 2 people. You know, actually, there may be more than 2 this year. Who knows what's going to happen? It's so kind of wild and interesting. But we'll have approximately half the population saying, "How could the other half actually believe what they're believing?" Because it's been that close for a while. And then the other side saying the same thing. How can they possibly believe that? They're going to take us down the tubes, you know, one and the other. We're pitted against each other in some way that doesn't feel that healthy. You know, so one side's going to see the other side as some type of socialist, elitist, effete snobs that are completely deluded on how things should be. And the other side's going to see the other group of people as kind of ignorant, fundamentalist, uneducated hicks who are completely deluded. You know, there's a gulf there. I don't know if we've had this much polarization since the Civil War. I mean, there's been other times where we've had really pointed polarization. But each side comes up with some kind of rationale that speaks to them. They have charts, graphs, you know, pithy statements that demonstrate that they're right. And unfortunately, part of the political process seems to be that you inflame the situation as much as you can and encourage a group of people to see the other people as really bad, wrong, and even demonize them in some ways. You know? And so it's like campaigns can often be based on creating fear and ridicule of another. But our practice gives us the tools to move in a different direction. We don't have to just kind of flush down the tube with the kind of common emotional upheaval. And remember that the arc of our practice is to turn toward our experience very directly and feel it in an embodied way. To recognize what's going on when it's going on. Am I feeling fear? Am I feeling anger? Where do I feel it in the body? You know, become more intimate with it. I like to try a little reflection. And I'm going to read you quotes from different... one of these people can probably be president. You know. And I want you to kind of go inside. So just take a few deep breaths. And when I read them, I want you to recognize your internal reaction. You know, recognize it. What is it? Is it kind of a joy or camaraderie, or is it there is a resistance, anger? What do you get? Name the reaction to yourself, but allow the reaction to happen. Feel it in the body. Where do you feel it? First quote. This election presents a stark choice. We can continue down the road of the Obama Democrats, more and more spending, debt, and government control of the economy, or we can return to the founding principles of our nation, free markets, physical responsibility, and individual liberty. It's from Ted Cruz. This election presents a stark choice. We can continue down the road of the Obama Democrats, more and more spending, debt, and government control of the economy, or we can return to the founding principles of our nation, free markets, physical responsibility, and individual liberty. Where in the body? What reaction? Can you name it? Another one. A nation will not survive morally or economically when so few have so much while so many have so little. We need a tax system which asks the billionaire class to pay its fair share of taxes and which reduces the obscene degree of wealth inequality in America. That's Bernie Sanders. What goes on inside when you hear that? A nation will not survive morally or economically when so few have so much while so many have so little. We need a tax system which asks the billionaire class to pay its fair share of taxes and which reduces the obscene degree of wealth inequality in America. Bernie Sanders. A third, staying in the body, seeing if there is a reaction. What do you recognize? Where do you feel it? Can you allow it to move through? There is no doubt that America remains the premier political, economic, military power in the world. And I both expect and count on it remaining so, because I think that's certainly in our best interest, but also in the best interests of the world. Hillary Clinton. There's no doubt that America remains the premier political, economic, military power in the world, and I both expect and count on it remaining so, because I think that's certainly in our best interest, but also the best interests of the world. Another one. Our great African American president hasn't exactly had a positive impact on the thugs who are so happily and openly destroying Baltimore. Donald Trump. Our great African American president hasn't exactly had a positive impact on the thugs who are so happily and openly destroying Baltimore. What do you feel? Can you be with it? Can you allow it to move? And finally, last one. At a time when the American family is threatened as never before, redefining it away from the union of one man and one woman only promises to weaken it as a child-rearing, values-conveying institution. Marco Rubio. At a time when the American family is threatened as never before, redefining it away from the union of one man and one woman only promises to weaken it as a child-rearing, values-conveying institution. So, what I've been trying to do when I hear voices that dissent from what I feel is, kind of my perspective of opinion, is to see if I can actually feel it more deeply and notice what's going on inside me, allowing it to play through, whether it's anger or whatever it is. That creates, as we know through our practice, through dealing with any difficult emotion or any emotion, a different relationship to it. We're less likely to be completely identified in reacting to it. We're feeling it deeply and fully. But there's a healthy spaciousness that can be cultivated with just a little practice. It doesn't have to be reactive and identified and lost. Now, it's not necessary to grant the other side's views any merit whatsoever. We're thinking creatures. We can make that discernment. But it is important, I think, to understand that they hold their views just as close to their heart as you might hold yours. And they believe them. And they believe them that they will serve the better good. We share that in common. But if it's impossible for us to ever kind of take on that little empathic step, then we're just locked in this loop of expressing over and over a kind of righteous indignation. And that creates a greater gulf between us and them. It solidifies it, hardens it. We can feel how that may be happening in our culture. So if we can bring ourselves more into the direct experience of kind of completely as we can in an embodied way of what's happening, it gives us a chance, Another important part of the path is what the Buddha called wise view or right view. And it's interesting because it's necessary before you begin the path, and it's kind of the end of the path. It's necessary in that that you have an inquisitiveness, and an interest in cultivating a perspective that's more aligned with the way things are or the way that nature works. So in order to even get started in a spiritual practice or thinking it's of any value, that view has to arise out of something. And all of you have that. Then as we practice and we learn to settle ourselves and relax deeply, and as insights and better understandings of the way things work come up, our lives are informed. And that view gets refined and refined and refined as we go through life. I mean, how many of us believe everything that we believed when we were 15? You know? For me, it's been helpful to always remember, or as much, unless I get lost and identified in my opinion, that no matter how smart I think I am or well-informed I am about a particular topic, I really can't know everything about it. I can't. It's a not completely informed opinion. Yes, I have to make choices. I have to vote for people, or I have to, choose this, that, or the other thing. But I'm always operating with incomplete information, all the time, always. It's like that Dalai Lama Jesus story. And I know I've told it here before, where he's confronted by somebody who's trying to get his goat, saying, well, the Christians believe, fundamentalist Christians believe, that if you don't believe and take the Lord Jesus Christ as your Savior, you're going to burn in hell forever. What do you say about that, Your Holiness? And of course, the Dalai Lama just kind of, well, they may be right. So that's an open perspective. Now, it doesn't mean that he's going to live his life with that firmly held. But he also realizes he doesn't have the whole picture. He's just a guy. He does a lot of practice. He knows a lot. He's wise. But he doesn't have the whole picture, and he knows it. So we can take we can't prophesize the future. We can't understand all the variables at play. We're making educated guesses. It's very nuanced and complex, this creation that we're born into. So if you have a radical left position, some would say, well, the time isn't right for somebody who's a moderate socialist like Bernie Sanders, that we really need somebody on the far right like Marco Rubio, or somebody that really carries a certain banner to then really galvanize people together as time goes on and bring greater change. That's a radical left opinion. There's also radical right opinions that are the same thing. It's like, we're getting enough of this Obama kind of stuff, and we elect another Democrat. In the long run, it may be best for us, because they're eventually going to see the fallacies of their thinking as it all crumbles, and we'll have greater power to move forward what we feel is the right way to work as a community. So the don't know mind over the long term can serve us. It's humbling. And it also can create a little relaxation. So we make the best choice we can, and stuff rolls on from there. And we know personally in our lives, a lot of the choices we made, well, if we could go back, we might tweak that a little bit. Or a lot in some cases. So this practice asks us to feel what's going on, recognize what's going on. I'm having a reaction to this. What is this reaction? Where do I feel it? Can I allow it to kind of move through? That's being more compassionate to ourselves and kind of putting a rudder in the water. And a compassionate stance isn't without a backbone. It's not that you're just going to give in and be sweet and everything is okay and la la la. Just because, well, I don't really know what's going to be the right thing in 1,000 years from now. I mean, it's a powerful, powerful vision to hold this universe as interdependent and that everybody counts. Even the people who believe that not everybody counts count. You know? But it also doesn't mean you don't take strong action where you see it's necessary. Put yourself in between something, to stop something or to start something. And from the Buddhist perspective, there's no such thing as evil. It's not part of the lexicon. There's only pronounced ignorance. You know? Even a terrorist, never mind a blustering presidential candidate, is acting from a deep confusion about how to feel happy and secure. They want that. You know? They don't have a deliberate desire to make things worse. They have a plan. So adopting that point of view doesn't mean minimizing any of the horrors that we have to deal with in this creation. But it does shift our perspective a little bit on how to work with them, or how to combat them, if you want to use that word, that warlike term. So we look deeper into our intentions. We look deeper into our experiences. And we ask, one of the questions we ask, do we want to really work towards a resolution to bring it all together, or do we just want to grind the opposition into dust? You know, sometimes we might be feeling that. This is from another meditation teacher, Susan Pavar, and she says, when I'm coming from the truth of my position, I feel hard and unforgiving. I dislike other people. I have enemies. When I touch in for my longing for this country to be a haven for goodness, decency, and tolerance, I feel sad. I see this sadness in everyone. I find that I have fellow travelers. So, a thicket of views. Important decisions are ahead. We're all participating in one way or another in that. The process has to be started somewhere to bring us all together. Small attitude shifts when we can be awake enough. Even if we can only hold on to them for a moment, there's a possibility there. We can at least try. So, I wish you the best in this election cycle, wherever you land. And we'll see you again next week.